All right, welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year. I hope everyone's recharged from KubeCon or probably sick. um, it looks like people are starting to trickle back into work. So, welcome, everybody. We are going to start today with a demo with Melvin for OpenLab. Then Aaron's going to do some release updates. Then we have three SIG updates today. It's going to be SIG apps with Matt Perina first, then SIG UI with Jeffrey Sika, and then SIG VMware with Mr. Steve Wong, and then we'll go into announcements. With that, Mr. Melvin, you have 10 minutes.
All right, thank you. Let me go ahead and get the share going here. Let's see. Just let me know if that shows up for you.
Looks good.
Great. All right, so thanks everybody for the opportunity to present to the community Open Lab. As you can see, my name is Melvin Hillsman, of course, as George has said. And Open Lab, we lovingly refer to as a playground where everyone can play. So it's created infrastructure for open source testing. And Open Lab aims essentially to do three things. Reduce friction for cloud ecosystem tooling integration, testbed delivery and maintenance efficiency, and also cross-community collaboration. So what we mean in terms of reducing friction is primarily the goal of users, right, is to create a service, provide a product, and they're going to utilize an individual or a set of open source projects for this. And there's a lot of options out there, and so there can be difficulty. And our goal is to work with communities and different projects to essentially, what we want to do is work towards a dashboard of things that are being tested well together, and then exposing that well testing data to users to let them know, hey, if you're trying to do this use case or provide this type of service and you're using open source projects, here's a great starting point. In terms of testbed delivery and maintenance efficiency, testbeds are wonderful, but they're pretty costly. So resources are not unlimited, of course, and it's a good idea to strive to be good stewards. So the systems that undergird the infrastructure that OpenLab uses, they're open source, and so when people come to us or folks that we talk to have some resources and they're like, hey, we're thinking about setting up a test bed. We want to become part of the federation, which I'll show you a little bit of that. Um, you know, the stuff that we use allows people to not have to build out duplicate resources or make duplicate stuff available. If someone's got a dedicated server, for example, you got network switch, you probably both can work together versus both of you need to have the same resources. And that's just small scale, but of course we're talking about test beds, which there's a lot of dedicated servers, a lot of network devices, et cetera. So cross-community collaboration, I mean, it pretty much speaks for itself, right? So what we offer is dedicated servers, virtual machines, network devices, there's IoT devices, GPUs, FPGAs, containers, of course. And these are just some of the partners. All the logos couldn't fit on there, unfortunately. But the configurations are reusable. So, for example, you can design a certain number of resources to be set up a certain way, and someone can come behind you and use that configuration versus having to recreate it again. It's federated and the footprint is global. So therefore, if you want to create like multiple sites, test stuff that's, going across the water, if you're talking about, from continent to continent. So there's a lot of different options that you can do with that. Just some of the highlights over the past year. We've been around for a year. So we've been working primarily with OpenStack, Gopher Cloud, Kubernetes, and Terraform. And these are just some of the highlights. So we're able, for example, to help land Cinder v3, which is volume support in Kubernetes for the external cloud provider. OpenStack v2 support had been around for quite some time. V3 there's some difficulty in landing it, so we're able to help that happen. The Go SDK, as you can see, there's additional projects that have been made available. So therefore, those projects or that functionality is also available to folks who use that SDK, which people who are using the external cloud provider depend on that. The CI that we've been providing it to the external cloud provider since Kubernetes 1.11. So all the conformance testing and things like that have been taking place has been running through the OpenLab CI. Cluster API integration is in flight, and just a couple other things, like a commercial entity with open source project Kubernetes, or Lucy, I think is the name of the company, their machine controller, has been using the CI, adopt OpenJDK, very big project, having difficulty with deploying multiple operating systems because primarily they were using dedicated servers, so we're helping them virtualize. And then OpenStack, we're part of the assisting it being on the CNCF CI dashboard. So getting started is pretty straightforward. We have a openlabtesting.org website, kind of a high-level overview. Openlabtesting.org itself, without the docs prefix, is essentially just like our outward-facing default touch point, kind of the marketing site, more or less. OpenLab Start, bit.ly/OpenLab Start is where you can test stuff, get started. So basically we use GitHub issue templates, and then if you just want to jump in and start working on things, bit.ly/OpenLab Project Board is where we throw a bunch of stuff at. We're in IRC, Ask OpenLab, and we use groups.io for the mailing list. So demos, I know we only had 10 minutes, so I didn't want to try to jump into like anything live. So I'm just going to kind of walk through some screenshots. So CI setup is pretty easy. You just install a GitHub app. You select the particular repository that you want the GitHub app. These permissions I have there listed are very open because it was just me doing it really quick, but the CI system itself is permissions are more restrictive. You can confirm, of course, that the app has been installed. And then basically when jobs run, you get kind of this view. Everyone's able to see this. You can click on the job when it's running, and then you'll get a stream of what actually is happening on the server as the job is running. You can, so I highlighted here just a simple test. So it uses Ansible under the hood, and I have a playbook with 2 plays, which is create a test file and then cat that test file, and you can see that it worked there, right? And so that's pretty straightforward. It's a CI like any other CI essentially, but the focus is on gating. So the benefit, like I said, we use Zool under the hood, and it uses Ansible. And one of the benefits of it is that you can actually do cross repo dependency. So you can say a patch in this repo depends on a patch in another repo to land first. And so it's CI, but really the focus of it is gating. So don't land this patch until that other patch lands. Like I said, getting access to resources is pretty straightforward. You can just go visit this link here, click on test request, and it's just a simple form you fill out. The real only cost for using OpenLab resources is essentially you have to write a blog post. It has to contribute to open source in some kind of way, just so the information is provided back to the community. You have access to the resources. There's no cost other than your time. So I had this video. Hopefully it's going to play pretty quickly within this time frame. And it's just me walking through using one of the test beds that we partner with. And so in this test bed, we have what we call profiles that experiments are based on. And so profiles are those shared configs that I talked about. You can see there's a number of them listed here, and you can use the topology viewer in order to see the layout of the nodes. When you create an experiment in this particular test bed, it defaults to using OpenStack because it's one of the fundamental things that this test bed offers. But you have complete and total access from, complete root access to the servers. There's also like Kubernetes profiles. There's these massive profiles you can see here with like all these different nodes, multiple sites connected via an L2 link. If you just want a couple nodes, you just want one node, you want a daisy chain of a bunch of nodes together, that's available as well. You can create an experiment profile just by simply going to this topology editor. You can drag and drop nodes over here, create multiple sites. Like I said, it's pretty low difficulty, or not really difficult to use. There's also CLI tools that are available. So folks who want to automate some of this, that's also available. You can just drag and drop from one node to the other, from one site to the other. It creates an L2 link. You see, it's pretty easy to just move, one node of a different type from one site to the other. I'm just going to add a couple more nodes here in this video, and then I essentially just linked them up. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it right now since we're at the 10-minute mark. If anyone has any questions or would like to know more, of course, like I said, we can talk more about it later.
We have about 2 minutes for questions if anybody has any. Either type them in chat or holler in here. All right, and if not, we've put the links to all the resources in the show notes. So thanks for that, Melvin. Last chance for questions. Awesome, great, thanks. All right, moving on to release updates. Aaron Krickenberger, are you on?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Take it away, Sigbeard.
Sweet. Hi, I'm Aaron of Sigbeard. I am your release lead for Kubernetes 1.14. I'm super excited to take the community on this fun ride. So yes, I don't know how many of you are enjoying being back from vacation or the holidays or a bunch of time off, but this is me right now. So I am scrubbing through, right meow. Thank you very much. So I don't know that I have a lot to talk about today, but I think I'm going to do the silly thing of like reading through what's already in the meeting notes. So, I consider this week 0. There aren't enough people back to really kick the release off. But we did get the release team, we got all the leads for the release team finalized. Oh my goodness, you people in your back channel, I'm gonna have so much to respond to. So we have all the leads. We're looking to get all of the shadows for the release team. And my goal would be to have all of the shadows selected and locked in place by the end of next week, January 11th. I have a draft that I have circulated, a draft of the 1.14 schedule that I have circulated through former release leads, the current release lead shadows, and SIG release chairs to make sure that everything there looks good. It is, roughly speaking, the same kind of schedule you are used to. So a quarter-long release sort of towards the end of March, with enhancements being frozen roughly by the end of January. And then finally, the thing that I talked about repeatedly at KubeCon, which I seem to have largely gotten consensus on, but the devil will be in the details, is the modest proposal that in order for anything to land in this release, it must have a KEP associated with it. Even if it didn't have a KEP before, it's got to have a KEP now. And my ask would be that all of the KEPs must have at a minimum a test plan that describes what this thing is and how it's being tested, so I can go verify that those tests are passing, and whether or not there are any upgrade or downgrade considerations for this thing. My goal here isn't so much to go through and vet all of these myself as, oh, percolator, that is the worst. My goal here isn't so much to be the individual who vets all of these KEPs. Instead, my goal is for SIG architecture to be the group of people who have the most cross-cutting technical expertise across all the SIGs and across the project as a whole. And I would like for them to take this into consideration. So I suspect that like SIG cluster lifecycle may have some opinions on the upgrade downgrade. I expect that SIG docs may even have some opinions that KEPs should maybe designate like what's the level of documentation here. But I kind of want, as the person in charge of the release, what I'm looking to consume is a checklist that requires a minimum of effort for me to review whether or not the requirements have been met. So my goal here is to talk about this at length in the SIG architecture meeting next week, after the community meeting, and we'll see how that meets contact with reality. I think that's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions, now would be a great time to ask.
I know before we move on, Aaron, I know we did take an item to ensure that we're scheduling KEPs for visibility during this meeting as well. I know for a while we were just looking at open KEPs and mentioning them during this meeting and giving people a chance to talk about that. But we did have some discussions about formalizing that a bit so that
Okay.
people get visibility on their KEPs and get the right people to the right meetings when they're being
We
reviewed.
can continue to use this as a forum, I think, to give a heads up for the larger like cross cutting changes. But by and large, like I'm just taking a look at what's in the V113 milestone. There are 25 open issues in the enhancements repo right now, and there are 12 open issues in the V114 milestone right now. So that's significantly more KEPs than we could cover on a weekly basis.
Sure.
So we'll see where things go from there.
Mm-hmm.
We are early in the release cycle. Now's the time to suggest changes if you have some thoughts or opinions. I know we got about 2/3 of the way through the 113 release retrospective. So this probably isn't the only major change that I'm going to be interested in seeing happen. I know we had a lot of discussion around deflaking Kubernetes end-to-end tests at the Contributor Summit and throughout KubeCon. Maria Natala, I don't exactly know how to pronounce her last name, the CI signal for this release is working on churning through the notes of those discussions, and we can see if there's an ongoing effort there. But otherwise, I look forward to having some more fully formed thoughts on all of this next. You people are killing me with your puns.
So make sure to mention the puns in the video so that the
yeah. Okay, so yes, this is clearly going to be a cat herding theme release. I do think I have sufficient cat T-shirts to make sure that I will herd all of your cats for you. Making sure that I drink coffee made from a percolator whenever I happen to be in a bad mood. Maybe I'll even fancy it up with the cappuccino. Okay, all right.
That's enough. Yeah. All right. Anything for point releases before we move on to the SIG updates? I feel like we just did a bunch of point releases right before KubeCon, so I don't think we have anything. Does anybody have any insight on that?
One other quick question. Maybe it doesn't have to be answered right now, but I know that we have talked in the past about setting up a schedule for point releases ahead of time, as opposed to having people perpetually ask when the next point release is going to be cut. Historically, that's been at the purview of the patch release manager, but I believe 113 is the first time there's a patch release team involved, and I filed an issue in SIG release to propose that they put together a schedule of when they might expect to cut patch releases. Recognizing, of course, that some security fixes might mandate off-cycle patch releases, but at least it could provide people some predictability and transparency.
Okay, any questions for Aaron before we move on? Okay, moving on to SIG updates. So usually what we do in Contribex is I set a schedule for the rest of the cycle for the SIGs that are going to be going, giving their status updates during this meeting. We try to get 3 SIGs a meeting, 10 minutes each. The next 3 for next week are going to be auto-scaling, networking, and PM. I'll be reaching out to you to give you some reminders. And then one thing that we will be doing is I'm going to set the schedule ahead of time and get a hold of those SIGs so that you have those hopefully on your calendars. But as we move on, our first SIG update of the year is going to be from SIG Apps with Matt Farina.
Hello. I guess I'll share my screen in the deck. This deck is linked in the meeting minutes. I'll go ahead and share. Can you all see it?
Yes.
All right. So this is following the template. What did we do last cycle? We got our charter done and merge, which was a great feat because we'd been working on it for months and things iterated, but like many of the SIGs did right near the end before KubeCon, we got it merged and finished. One of the things we did was we figured out what it would take to take cron job to GA, and I'm going to talk more about it in a minute. But when you look at the workloads and batch APIs, it's the one thing that sits out there that isn't GA, it's still a beta. And it has been for a very long time. And so we kind of talked through and figured out what it would take to fix that. We started something new called portable service definitions, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but we got that kicked off, got our first provisional CAP merged for it. We are working on the idea of application controller for aggregate status. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but we kind of figured out what that meant. And we're prepping for the deprecation of the beta APIs in the apps group. A lot of work was just prep work and figuring things out in the short cycle this last quarter. So what are we doing? It may not be a surprise. We're actually going to start executing on a number of these things, either beginning work, or we're actually looking for somebody to help us lead cron job to GA, because a bunch of controller stuff needs to be rewritten. And so we are actually looking for volunteers or people who want to be a maintainer and involved in taking this to GA. So I'm actually going to walk through each of these because they're kind of the things we've got going right now. The first one is cron job to GA. It's a V1 beta 1 API still, and it has been for, I think, years now. And the real reason behind this is that it has scaling issues once you go past thousands of cron jobs. There is a point at which things start to break down in its scalability. And so we're looking for a better model for scaling, especially if you get into clusters that are, thousands of nodes with thousands and thousands of cron jobs. We want to make sure that we can continue to scale upwards as people may want to. But we do believe the API is stable, and it's just controller rewriting. And so we're looking for people to help us scale it up and interested in driving some of that work. We do have people who can mentor and guide, but as far as dig into that in the next few quarters, we don't exactly have that. And so this would be a multi-quarter rollout plan, so that way we can swap out controllers and test it and handle all of that in a stable manner. But this is one of the things that we're looking for and looking at. Are there any questions along the way? Oh, still going on the last jokes. All right.
Question.
Yeah.
You say rolling out over the next few quarters. I understand that you're still scrambling for personnel for this. So maybe it's unfair for me of me to ask for a timeline.
Yeah, we don't have a timeline. We have an idea of how many releases it'll take. 2 to 3 releases to actually get this out once somebody starts. But as far as really starting on it, we haven't figured that out yet, because at first we'll have the new controller rewrite, but we're only going to opt into it. And then we're going to want the ability to opt out of it before it fully replaces it and we can go GA. We're going to take a very conservative approach because a lot of the controller needs to be rewritten to handle this. And we really want to make sure it's tested and gone through its hoops before it graduates to be some kind of GA thing. And so it's going to be really conservative, probably 3 releases to get it out once we start.
Right, but we don't know when to start because personnel issues. Cool.
Because we're looking for somebody to work on that. A bunch of our controller folks have had other things happening over the last several months and continue into this year because they're busy. Like Janet, who's been off doing these wonderful things with the KubeCons. They've been off doing other things, and so some more bodies would be helpful here. Aaron, great question. Have we brought SIG scalability in? No, but when we get started, we'll make a point of it.
Mm-hmm. You have another question from Marky Jackson as well. Are there any requirements to join that effort?
You got to be able to write code. I don't think there's any other requirements other than normal Kubernetes ones if you want to go contribute. So if you're interested, my handle is Matt Farina. It's there at the end everywhere, pretty much. If you want to come find me afterwards, I'm more than happy to answer any questions or try and help get you looped in on it if somebody wants to come get involved. All right. The next thing we have going is what we're calling portable service definitions. Okay, so here's the problem. You want to work with a SaaS in Kubernetes and you want to make it portable. So say you're going to do MySQL and WordPress, right? And MySQL, you want to use a SaaS. Now you want to declaratively deploy this into a cluster running in Google Cloud. And then you want to go do this in Azure. How do you do it? Well, today you can't. And so we're looking to solve this problem by following something probably similar to the way PVs, PVCs, and storage controllers work to make this kind of model work with different backends implementing it. This isn't a replacement for Service Catalog. It's more of a user experience and declarative experience. somebody asking, is this different from an operator? We would actually implement this with more than one operator, right? So you'd have one operator that might know how to talk to AWS, another one that knows how to talk to Azure, but they all share the same CRDs and CRs and close the loop with, for secret information, secrets following the same schemas. So that way, when you declare and you get stuff back, no matter where you deploy it, you're going to have a standardized format, but many different controllers can implement that interface. And that's what we're looking at doing here. And that's actually the reason we want to have one catalog, so many controllers housed in many different places can do this. Right? It's trying to solve this problem while still by having a clear interface, but there can be lots of implementations, and CRDs are our interface and controllers will be the implementation. And so that's one of the things we're working on. We are looking for contributors, but we have a number of people who are interested in working on this. The CAP was heavily discussed and merged near the end of last year. And so this year is when we will start up and have the repo kicked off and really get moving on this stuff. Then there's the application controller status, right? So again, WordPress example, MySQL as a stateful set, WordPress as a deployment. How do you get roll-up status on all of it? We've been working on the application CRD for a while that lets you define characteristics and have, well, here's an application and its parts, and how do we deal with that? Including meta information like icon location, stuff like that. They can be used in interfaces and visual places. But now, how do you deal with a roll-up status? It's the very first time we're getting into a controller that has any kind of opinion, because we want the ecosystem to be very opinionated about these things. And here we're saying, well, what could be a cross concern that would be useful? And that's where controller statuses come in to look at, well, how do we get the status of all of the different things underneath it and provide a roll-up? So you can say, is my application, including all of its parts, healthy or not? And so we're starting to get into this one as well. And then the next one, and this is one that'll have implications. We're talking about how do we deprecate the beta APIs. The workloads APIs have been GA since 1.9, and the deprecation policy says that 2 cycles after something's been GA, the betas can go away. I think it's 2 releases or 6 months. It's long past that point now. And so we're actually talking about turning off the ability to accept the beta workloads APIs. That means anybody who's doing anything. So in fact, I reviewed a pull request this morning where somebody was still referring to the old extension API for deployment, which is many versions ago. And, actually saying that that cannot be, we won't accept those anymore, and turning those off at the API. And so we are looking at how do we head to a plan. And I think the current proposed plan has it turned off in 1.15 with an optional flag to re-enable it. And then after that, we can take that optional flag off because we want to gracefully do this for a while. But we're looking at that. So if you're using the old versions of the objects, the implication is please update to the GA stable ones. And so that's kind of the different things that we're working on and looking at right now in SIG-Apps. How can you contribute? We're actually looking for people to contribute and sling code for any of these areas and get involved. We have people who will mentor and guide and help out with these things, but we are looking for people who are interested in helping out with this stuff. And if you're interested in things like Kubi Builder or some of that other stuff, that's actually how we build the application CRD and controller. So we're reusing things, which gives opportunities to work with some of our sister projects. And of course, where can you find us? These are our details, again, for these links. You can find them over in the slide deck, which is linked off of the doc. Are there any other questions? Anything else I can answer?
Do you have an aggregate set of KEPs or links for this proposed work? Or is it go to K enhancements and find them?
Not every, well, let's see, the deprecation I don't think has a KEP yet. We got to discuss, do deprecations need KEPs and how do we do that? The other things, the cron job one does not yet have a KEP because we've just talked through recently how we would go about doing it. So we probably only now have enough information to write one up. They will all have KEPs without question. It's just a matter of getting them. The application one, there's a KEP around that probably needs to be updated to include this work. And then the portable service definitions definitely has a KEP that needs to be updated based on some discussions at KubeCon. But we are following KEPs for all of this stuff. Aaron.
Yeah, back on the cron job thing. When you said cron jobs don't scale, what does that mean? Like, what metrics were you looking at, or what issues were you seeing?
I want to say that cron job controller keeps everything in memory, and so if you go thousands and thousands and thousands of cron jobs, your memory just scales vertically forever, and that's a problem. And so we're looking for rewriting the controller so that your memory usage does not scale infinitely as your cron jobs do.
Okay, I guess I would be interested in finding a way to phrase that from an end user visible perspective. I'm not sure if I would expect end users to see memory usage balloon like that.
Yeah, but that's actually what's stopping us from going GA, is fixing that memory usage ballooning issue. Yeah.
Jeff, go ahead.
So from an end user perspective, during office hours, we've actually had 2 different people say that they've run into scaling issues with cron jobs. So it's not just a theoretical thing. They had like 40,000 cron jobs, and they were wondering why all of a sudden they stopped after 20 minutes. So
Jeff, if you run into one of those people again, you want to send them our way to contribute to a fix?
I will happily do that.
Please, we know the problem is there. We're looking for people to help us with it.
All right.
All right. Any final questions for Matt? All right. Good segue into Jeff for SigUI. Let me go ahead and share your slides.
Thank you. I can't share because I'm also streaming, and that's really, really weird to do.
How's that?
Perfect. All right. So my name is Jeffrey Sika. I'm part of SigUI. Next slide. So I think we last did our update in August or late July. Since then, we have finished and merged our UI charter. Hopefully that is something that a lot of updates will have. We've done 2 releases, the last of which was 1.10.11, and the big thing with that one was it was patching a CVE that would let people read secrets in Cube systems, specifically dashboard-related secrets, but it's something that was definitely a hole that needed to be plugged. A bunch of us met at the Contributor Summit to go over roadmap planning for 2019. We had a lot of different opinions on that, and you'll kind of see where we're starting to go in the next slide. Metric server support. For the most part, we can finally start supporting metric server since, Heapster went away a little while ago. It's not finalized yet, but we have functional code. We just have to put in a sanctioned repo and get a container out that will work alongside the dashboard container. Just after the holidays, we had a big merge from a Angular migration branch to our master branch. So through most of 2018, a lot of us have been working on updating our version of Angular. That doesn't necessarily sound that big, except it was a full rewrite of our entire front end. So that's why a lot of work hasn't necessarily been public. Not public, but it's been grunt work, not very glamorous. So now that that's been merged in, the next release will be on a new version of Angular, and it will also change our versioning schema because it is such a large change. And lastly, we had an annual survey of dashboard users where we send a poll out to everyone and anyone that is interested in telling us how they use the dashboard and what they think of it. All the relevant links to these things are in the slides. It's just kind of a lot to go over in a short amount of time. So if you were interested, please click the links. I believe the slides are linked in the agenda. Next slide, please. So what we're doing in the first quarter-ish of 2019, we're going to take the metric server code that we've written to support metric server and actually roll it into our next release. This is an entirely short-term solution. Long-term, we are looking to be able to support Prometheus and other metrics backends, but for now, we need to have something to actually have our nice shiny charts. So this is what it is. Hoping to get Prometheus and other metric support done probably Q3 of 2019, but we have to see where things shake out. We are changing our versioning schema, like I said, so we're going to start with a fresh 2.0 release. Originally, Dashboard was tied to the Client Go versioning schema, so if, for example, we're on Dashboard v1.10, that means we support Client Go 1.10. So we're a little bit behind. We're going to leapfrog, and 2.0 is going to be version Client Go 1.13. We will document which versions of Client Go are we're dependent on. But because it's such a large rewrite of the front end, it made more sense to go with a fresh versioning schema. And hopefully by the end of Q1 2019, we will have better OAuth support, so a lot of issues that we've been seeing with people dealing with authenticating to the dashboard go away. So how can you contribute? We have a bunch of good first issues. That link will point you to all of those labels. There is currently a checklist with the what's left before we do an Angular migration release. And we would love to hear additional features that people are interested in. One of the big ones I know that we have heard is integration with third-party things like Prometheus, like other auth providers. So that kind of integration is what we're really trying to push for in 2019. There's the link to the repo if you didn't have it. And if you need to find us, we're on Slack. We're fairly responsive in Slack. We also have our Google Groups email, and I think that's it. Any questions? Thank you, George.
All right, if there's no questions for SIG UI, SIG VMware with Steve is next.
Okay, can you guys see that?
Looking good.
Okay. What we did last cycle, 3 major things. We're working on moving the cloud provider from in-tree to out-of-tree. So this early release and alpha release was occurred on December 10, just before KubeCon Seattle. We also, in conjunction with that, came out with the initial release of the CSI provider for vSphere storage. And the slide deck is linked in the notes, and these links are live if you want to see more about that and how to use it. Third, we did a release of the cluster API provider for vSphere. So this is in conjunction with work underway under SIG cluster lifecycle for enabling the cluster management API to provision the underlay for Kubernetes clusters. By the way, I'll give a reference to a good presentation on this whole subject that had some demos that occurred at KubeCon. It was with Chris Nova and Lok Nguyen, and that video and deck is published from the KubeCon Seattle event. So if you want to learn more about that cluster API provider, I'd recommend that you go watch that presentation. For the upcoming cycles, the overall theme, it's the same 3 things that we did in the last release, but to bring them up to production grade, enhance the testing suite. We want to get full parity for what's in the in-tree cloud provider. Right now, the support for zones didn't make it in the initial release of the out-of-tree. With regard to CSI, the CSI effort itself is moving. They've got work underway to add features like snapshot, and we intend to track that going forward. The initial CSI release didn't have support for the zones feature. In other words, zones would affect scheduling and take into account possible constraints on the persistent volume mounts. So the goal is to inject storage-aware zones in the upcoming release. And then finally, the cluster API, it's an alpha feature, but we recognize that there is an opportunity for enhanced end-to-end testing to take place using that API. How does what's going on in the VMware SIG affect you? I did meet with a person at KubeCon, and the subject came up that they would love to have licensing to enable testing Minikube with VMware's Fusion and Workstation, I call them laptop hypervisors as opposed to data center enterprise hypervisors, but we started discussions on how we can enable that into the Kubernetes CI/CD lifecycle. And I'll just give a word out that if anyone runs into a situation where there is this licensing issue where the open source world might intersect some commercial components, get in touch with people in the VMware SIG and we can make things happen should that ever be an issue. And we can also probably provide resources for any efforts related to end-to-end testing. We've even got some things available like simulators that might be able to run in any test suites running in public clouds. So on the sub-project Minikube, we're working on support for Fusion and Workstation, and we want to get this into the Minikube CI/CD tests. With regard to KEPs, the VMware SIG doesn't have ownership of any direct KEPs at this time, but we are actively working on the ones linked here that came out of SIG Cluster Lifecycle and SIG Cloud Provider. So the links are in the deck. Related working group status, we've got 2 sub-working groups, one on the cloud provider with recurring meetings and a second one on the cluster API. I don't know, the next meetings are there, should you care to join, and videos and meeting notes are posted at the links. How can you contribute? We've got 3 help wanted bugs. These probably aren't beginner level where it might at least be useful to have a little experience with regard to what's going on, although one of these is a doc bug. And if somebody does want to get started entry level, I think we could come up with mentors to help that effort. So just get in touch. Finally, where do you find us? I'm Can't Be Wong. My co-chair is Fabio. And these are the SIG links. These links are also available in the SIG charter. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? Okay. Thanks, Steve, and thanks to all the SIG reps for doing the updates. Real quick, let's go into announcements. First reminder is KubeCon EU is coming up, and the CFP closes on January 18th. That's about 2 weeks away. So welcome back, everybody. And there's a link there to the location and when CFP closes and when they announce the accepted talks. If you attended the Contributor Summit, please fill out the survey. You should have gotten an email. So please search for Contributor Summit in your email if you attended. We do take those survey results very seriously, so please fill that out. Even if it's you all did a great job, that's good to know, or terrible job, that's also good to know. If you want to do a demo during the first 10 minutes of this meeting, like how Melvin did, we're always looking for signups. If you look to the top of the notes document, there's a little link there for instructions. You basically just sign up, and then I'll go and assign you a date, and then you'll do that. We like to schedule at least a few of them in advance. So now that it's a fresh new year, there's plenty of slots open for demos. So if you're working on something cool, please check out that link. And the last thing I wanted to mention before we do shout outs is the folks at Cloud Yuga. They've been doing this the past few KubeCons. They cross-reference the videos to everyone's talks and their slides and link it up together in a really, really useful list. And I found this to be very, very useful to catching up for KubeCon. So please check out that link. It's been crucial for me to figure out what talks I need to catch up on and slides and all that stuff. And I'm pretty sure they accept pull requests as well. Shout outs, just real quick, since it's a new year, just to explain how this works. We have hash shout outs on Slack. If you see someone going above and beyond the call of duty, feel free to just toss out a shout out for them in that channel. And then we'll read out their name during this community meeting so they can get a nice thanks from the community. So this kind of covers all the shout outs during the break, but Jeff Grafton would like to shout out to Christoph Blecker for breaking the GoDev verification checks into their own job, bringing the rest of the verified checks job down to 41 minutes. Jeff Grafton would also like to shout out to Fisher Zoo for finally fixing our generated code to not include the year, thus preventing the build from breaking and needing Happy New Year PRs. And there's a list of PRs there where people had to update the year, and I guess all that work goes away, which is great. And Ideal Hack would like to shout out to the Chinese reviewer team of SIG-Docs, Cheng Rui, Adam Dang, Xiaolong He, Peter Zhao, and there's a blog post about our second new contributor workshop at KubeCon there, linked in the show notes. And it is also, the blog post is also available in Chinese, and I've linked that there. And there's a link to the pull request. And that concludes the shout outs. Does anybody have any announcements or anything that they would like to say as people start to come back for the new year before we break? Going once, going twice. All right, everybody, you got 15 minutes back. Thanks, everybody, and Happy New Year.